Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to Media Matters. We're in a, that's it, here's our content now on Arthur Melo. We got going finally after some technical issues yesterday. We finally got our contributor that we wanted. He's from Forbes, Mr. Adam Digby. Adam, welcome back to AI Pro. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for sticking it out and waiting for me to manage to get some Wi-Fi working so that I could join you today.
No, I think this show is going to be really interesting because, you know, you're passionate about Juventus and we know this. And this is going to be, I think this is going to be an eye-opener for listeners. I hope so anyway, especially for the conversation we had just before we joined, we pressed the record button. So as we've already let everybody know, this is all about Arthur. So when he turned up at Juve, it was a pretty controversial transfer, Adam. Firstly, let's start right at the beginning. This transfer is still being investigated, I believe. So what were your thoughts on the whole of that situation when it happened?
Okay, so if you take out the figures, it doesn't seem too bad. Juve gave up a 30-year-old Miralem Pjanic for an early 20s Artur Melo, who'd impressed at Barcelona but had some injury problems, and they gave Barcelona 15 million. The problem comes when Juve and Barca, through their accounting, put that Artur Melo is valued in that deal at 75 million and Pjanic is valued at 60, because clearly that's just figures put on both players to inflate their value so that both clubs have more, essentially, as a business, have more expensive assets, which is crazy, especially in a time where club finances, that figure is still hanging over Artur. He's a 75 million euro player, and he, with the best will in the world, as good as I think he potentially might be, he isn't. Miralem Pjanic has played a handful of games at Barcelona and is seemingly on his way to Dubai after a spell in Turkey. A 60 million euro midfielder in his 30s, really? You know, it's just one of those things that Italian clubs have been doing for a long, long time at lesser values. A practice described as plus valenza in Italy, added value. And it really is just overinflating prices in what's essentially a swap deal with very little money involved, because 15 million is not that much for a top 5 league club playing in the Champions League regularly, is it? You know, giving one midfielder for another and paying 15 million is probably a transfer you wouldn't give a second glance to at most of these clubs, right?
Absolutely, you don't. I mean, it's crazy. 60 million. You just went through that there. My head was pinging at 60 million euros for a 30-year-old.
Yeah.
Just who pays that? Like, how do you get away? How do you even think that you can get away with it? like it's not realistic, and that's why it's being investigated, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what was his value to you if you were selling Pjanic at the time? Half of that, 30 million, maybe?
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, maybe.
Because he was playing well for you guys.
Juve paid about 32 million for him, but they'd spent 3 years trying to, I guess, like a bad mechanic in a body shop. They were trying to hammer him into being a regista, which is something he certainly wasn't. If you go back and look at him at his early Roma days, he was a fantastic attacking midfielder, great around the edge of the box, a good shot. Obviously, we know deadly at set pieces, whether it's corners or free kicks. but a really progressive, forward-thinking player who got shoved into this role in front of the defence by Max Allegri and then kept there by Maurizio Sarri because he didn't have any better options. So he was being misused and miscast. But yeah, he was going into his 30s. He was playing okay. Certainly wasn't a Maurizio Sarri regista, which was part of the big problem for Maurizio Sarri. But he's a good midfielder, a serviceable player. But 60 million, no chance. Like you say, half that, and you're still thinking, Juve have done all right there if they sold him for 30 million in his 30s.
But then on the other side, you get Arthur.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, were you excited?
Yeah, I was actually. I think the one thing I would say is I would say what a shame he didn't come a year earlier, because as I just alluded to there, Maurizio Sarri was the coach the year before he arrived in 1920. And you can, even now you can think of Arturo playing that Jorginho role in a Maurizio Sarri team and think it would have just been a perfect fit. Andrea Pirlo tried to play in a different way that didn't really suit Arturo, but just to stick in that moment, my very first thought was, it's a year too late. He would have been perfect for Sarri. But I was still really excited about what a ball-playing Brazilian regista could be in any Serie A team, because we know the pace is a little bit slower in Serie A. As much as you might want to play up-tempo with Andrea Pirlo, it's still slower than it would be elsewhere. And you would imagine it would perfectly suit one of those Spanish-style, Barcelona-bred, tippy-tappy midfielders, wouldn't you? It's what you've been trying to make Pjanic into and failing. So it filled a need for Juve and looked like being an upgrade on the player that they'd had in that position in previous seasons.
Amazing. So let's do this. What happened?
He played a season with Andrea Pirlo with a very disgruntled Cristiano Ronaldo, which is kind of said in hindsight, but for him to leave 2 days into the following season, he can't have exactly been happy all year, can he? And we look at the way that he's performed at Manchester United and the way that he's demanded a move away from there that hasn't materialised. I don't think being a teammate of Cristiano Ronaldo has been great fun for anybody over the last 2 years. And I think when you're a young player coming to a new culture, you speak the same language as Ronaldo. Obviously, he's Brazilian. He speaks Portuguese. Ronaldo would speak Spanish too. You would hope that you could find some sort of connection there. You're the guy in midfield going to be pulling the strings. Ronaldo's the guy up front responsible for scoring all of the goals. You would hope that there'd be some kind of chemistry there. But there really wasn't with anybody. I think the team chopped and changed a lot. Arturo struggled to adapt a little bit to Italy in the early going. He was part of a group of Juve players who quite irresponsibly had a party at the height of the coronavirus pandemic, which was really serious in Italy. Obviously, it was really serious everywhere, but I think Italy was, outside of China, was probably the epicenter of the whole thing, wasn't it? And him, Weston McKennie and Paulo Dybala, who was vice-captain of the club, really should have known better, threw a party with their significant others and a couple of close relatives as well. And they both got dropped from the team for a length of time as a result of that. All three of them suffered with COVID at various times last season. So they weren't, the season before, sorry, so they weren't careful. And that's hardly the best way to start life at
doesn't sound ideal at all.
A very, very traditional institution like Juventus, where you do everything by the book and you never make waves. It's even worse. So I think he struggled immediately because of that. And then the rest of the team just wasn't clicking, wasn't cohesive. Andrea Pirlo, obviously, the first job he'd had as a coach was being the Juventus coach. I believe he was the third team coach at Juve for about 48 hours, and then it changed and he was the head coach suddenly. So the planning that went into last season was 2 seasons ago was hardly ideal for a new player. And when you're a player who's going to be looking to touch the ball 100 times a game and keep things ticking over in midfield, and you need that continuity, you need that cohesion and clarity, you're really going to struggle. And I think obviously, as I said, some of that was self-inflicted. He had a little bit of injury problems, but that first season, to me, really boiled down to just a complete lack of any form of identity or plan throughout the whole club, and then some irresponsible mistakes by Artur among other players.
Irresponsible mistakes on the pitch or off?
Both. He made a couple of high-profile errors on the pitch as well, including a awful pass across his own box for against Benevento that led to a Benevento win at Juventus Stadium, which, as you can imagine, went down remarkably badly in Italy. But then what I would add to that as an instant caveat is Rodrigo Bentancur did exactly the same thing against Porto not too long after, and he's gone to Tottenham and thrived. So then that's a theme that I'll come back to a number of times in this podcast, is Bentancur thriving, because Artur, for all his struggles, there's clearly a very, very talented player in there. And that first season, I can't blame him when the entire team, including a global megastar like Cristiano Ronaldo, struggled to live up to their usual levels. You can't just turn around and pin that on a young kid who's come from Spain via Brazil.
Do you think then that kind of sets the tone then for the rest of his time at Juve? Because the start's so bad, it's hard to recover. And does he have any support there? And, is there, are there any other fellow nationals, maybe, you talked about Ronaldo, but was there anybody else that could have maybe made him feel like home, or made it feel like home?
Obviously, there's Alexandro, the left back, and Danilo, but Alexandro really struggled in that first season as well, and last season on top. So I think that's probably been a little bit of a struggle for him. I mean, to jump ahead a little bit, you look at the arrival of Leandro Paredes earlier this week, and he's got the red carpet rolled out for him. He's in the stands in a game before he's actually signed for the club. He's pictured in the dressing room with Angel Di Maria, who was his former teammate at PSG, and Paul Pogba, who knows him very well. Paredes has played in Serie A before. Juve have added Bremer, the Brazilian defender, in the summer since as well. And there's just so much more of a healthy environment for Paredes that he's getting a chance that Artur really never had. So if Paredes fails, I would say immediately that's 100% down to him, because he's getting every opportunity and every advantage that certainly wasn't there for Artur Melo 2 years ago.
It's talking cheese. So let's go to your tweet. Let's talk about, you tweeted something, I think it was yesterday morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
Good enough for Klopp, but not Allegri. So yeah. What were you trying to say there?
What I'm getting at there, without having the whole debate over again on Twitter, because it's tired and you do it every day, is the amount of players who've left Juventus after being allegedly not good enough, or struggling, or not fitting in, or they don't suit the style of play, or all these excuses that are trotted out for players under Max Allegri in his first tenure and since, who go on to other clubs and absolutely thrive. Not just look okay, not do okay, but absolutely shine. You look at João Cancelo, who wasn't the type of fullback that Juventus were looking for, we were told. And I like Danilo. I think Danilo is a very good, very functional defender. João Cancelo is a very special player, isn't he? Not that I'm expecting you to admit that he's the best right back in the Premier League when you have Trent in your own team.
Well, he probably is right now with the way Trent's playing.
Yeah, but, he's right in that conversation, isn't he? If he's not the best, he's 1B. So you give that up to get Danilo because he's not a good enough defender. It just seems ludicrous. You look at the two players at Tottenham, Bentancur and Kulusevski. Kulusevski was great at Parma, came to Juve, really struggled, couldn't cut it, didn't like the style of play, the team, all of that. Goes to London, plays for Conte, who plays the most Italian of Italian styles of football, that dour, almost five at the back. Get it to the strikers and hope that they can do something kind of play that that has blighted Italian football for so long now and sees them struggling in so many ways. Kulusevski is reborn there. He's brilliant. Rodrigo Bentancur giving away cheap balls like Arthur Melo 2 years ago, and certainly never kicked on from the early promise he showed after arriving from Boca Juniors. Is every inch a good quality starting midfielder in the Premier League for a club with Champions League ambitions, isn't he? You know, and the list just goes on and on and on. And yes, Artur has probably struggled as much, if not more, than all of those, but that's a pattern. You know, it's not just a one-off. It's not one player. It's not one position. It's Christian Romero was signed by Juve from Genoa, sent to Atalanta, never given a chance at Juve. They gave Atalanta a buyout clause, which they immediately triggered and then turned around and sold him for a massive profit to Tottenham again. You know, there's just so many players who've been at Juve, struggled, we're told they're not good enough, they're moved on, and they look like extremely useful players who came to Juve on a really good price and a really good deal and were just shipped out for relatively low fees. And in the same summer where you've given up on Matthias de Ligt for basically the same money you paid for him 3 years ago, you know full well that de Ligt is going to shine at Bayern and he's probably going to win the Champions League and he's going to go on to be the best defender of his generation. And it's like 3 disappointing seasons at Juve and he's fed up of the style of play. And it's like, well, I don't blame him because I am as well. You know, and that pattern just keeps on repeating.
You know, I was expecting a scathing pod about Arthur and how bad he is, you know. I'm so like completely, this is just blown me away.
Like, the thing is, I can't do it because as I tweeted in a follow-up to somebody who replied to that tweet, I have absolutely I watch Juve every week. As a Juve fan, as I hate to use the word journalist because I write about football for a living. I think a journalist is like the guys who travel to war zones and report on really serious stuff. I write about football, but as somebody who covers Juventus for a living, I watch that team week in and week out. And I can hand on heart genuinely say, I have no idea if Arthur Melo is a good midfielder or not, because the way that the team has been, the way that the coaching has been, the way that the entire club has been, there's absolutely no way of judging. Has he had some bad games? Yeah, of course he has. So did Cristiano Ronaldo. So has Dusan Vlahovic since he arrived. So did Matthias de Ligt. So did Rodrigo Bentancur. So did Kulusevski. So did João Cancelo. All these players who've come to the club with great reputations. And,
dude, I'm so excited now.
You know, all those who obviously there's a couple of others. Like there's Douglas for everyone. There's Douglas Costa who came from Bayern for 40 million. And was basically injured the entire time he was here. And Juve paid him to go and play for Santos. But there's all those players, and it's much more than just a pattern. You know, you look at Maurizio Sarri's left Juve and he's gone to Lazio, and he's got them humming already. And you just think, all these people, coaches, players. Igor Tudor was the assistant coach at Juve. He's left and he's doing really well. There's all these people who've left Juve and who've done really, really well. And for me, I know you can point to 1 or 2 players that Liverpool have signed in the Klopp era where you think, yeah, he made a mistake there or somebody made a mistake there. But they're rare, right? There's so many players where it's a player you don't know, a player you don't think is going to be great. Suddenly, they go to Liverpool and they become part of that machine that Klopp has built there. And every single player just goes on to a new level. And it absolutely wouldn't surprise me if Artur does the same, because that's just what Liverpool do right now, isn't it? You know, and you add to that all those players who've left Juve and gone and done it for far lesser coaches than Jurgen Klopp. And as much as, yeah, I can sit here and someone can say, oh, you're the expert on Juve, you know what you're talking about, you think he's rubbish. Yeah, probably if I summed up his time at Juve, his on-field production was rubbish. But Jurgen Klopp is a much better judge of a footballer than I am. And Jurgen Klopp is like, we need a midfielder. We miss out on such and such a target. He's gone to another club. Let's sign Arthur Melo from Juve. And I know last day of the window, your options are limited and all those things. But let's be honest, Liverpool can go and sign pretty much anybody they want. Like if they
Not sure
really
that's
wanted,
true, but yeah.
if they really want, okay, not anybody they wanted, but if you're saying a player who's not in the squad of a team, not in their plans, we can get him on loan for less than 10 million. Yeah. That's a list of 100 midfielders. Even yesterday on deadline day, it's 100. It's probably 20 proven Premier League midfielders. It's probably another 20 or 30 proven Bundesliga players that would be able to play the way that Klopp wants to play. It's probably another fistful of players at Champions League clubs who have that experience of playing at the highest level. It's a long list. And even yesterday, with that list of however many players, and they're not brilliant, they're not world beaters, they're not.
Yeah, they could have gone for Tielemans for 20 million if they wanted to.
Exactly. There's such a list of players, and Klopp chose Melo. Is Jurgen Klopp an idiot? No. Does his midfield really work, even if it's filled with Jordan Henderson and James Milner and Gigi Wijnaldum, who are nowhere near as talented a footballer as Melo clearly is? Yeah, every single week. That's why they keep winning the league. That's why they've won the Champions League and gone to a couple more finals. He knows what he's doing. And if you're on Twitter saying, I'm glad he's gone, he's rubbish, it's like, so you know more about football than Jurgen Klopp? No. Like, I'm not worried because Juve have done some great business. They've signed some good midfielders. I'm really happy with the state of Juve's midfield. But there's just this nagging voice at the back of my head that says, don't be surprised if Jurgen Klopp turns Melo into somebody who starts at the World Cup for Brazil in 2 months. And he looks like the player we were promised we were signing 2 years ago, because that's just what Liverpool do, really, isn't it?
I mean, I was going to ask you about his strengths and weaknesses, but you probably didn't see any of them.
I saw plenty of his weaknesses. If you put him in a team that doesn't work and with a language he doesn't speak and a disgruntled Cristiano Ronaldo, he's not very good.
Okay.
And if he coaches in his first season ever coaching, then he struggles. But
how about then? Do you think, obviously, he's coming to a team where I spoke to this with Dom that I just spoke to. He's got 4 Brazilians, well, 3 and a coach. Tafarel's here as well as a goalkeeping coach who's with him on the national team too. He's played central midfield with Fabinho as a double pivot for Brazil. He'll know Firmino, he'll know Alisson very well because they would have shared lots of time with the Copa as well. So he's coming in, and also those are all actually, I wouldn't say locker room leaders, but they're very important players at Liverpool, very successful players at Liverpool. So they're like, you gave an example of Danilo and the other guy who weren't having a good time. So if there was any negativity breeding in their, in their mindset or something, it could pass on to Arta. But here, they're all very settled. They have a very good group of people. Like the teams, they do have a mix of Portuguese speakers and as in they have a group, but they don't just sit together. They mix with everybody. Yeah, the whole squad has been built to rely on each other and have fun and, have nicknames for each other and have a laugh. Yeah. And I think, and also Thiago's here too, who's obviously Brazilian heritage, his parents.
Born in Italy as well.
Yeah, exactly. So there's lots of things at this club that could go in this guy's favour.
There's the whole everybody who. So you said there's the 3 Brazilian players and a Brazilian coach. Then you can add in everybody who speaks Portuguese because you have a couple of Portuguese players, right?
Yeah.
Then he played at Barcelona, so he speaks Spanish. So there's everybody who speaks Spanish. Then he's played in Italy, he speaks Italian. So the list, you just keep adding and adding and adding to the list. And the leaders at Liverpool, he'll be able to get. Mo Salah played in Italy, he speaks Italian, he played for Fiorentina, he played for Roma. There's all these players, all these threads that pull together. If he doesn't succeed at Liverpool, it's because he's not very good. It's not going to be because of any external factor. And you can't deny the fact that all those external factors contributed to his struggles at Juve. And if you want to say, okay, he had some injury problems and his form on the pitch himself wasn't great. Yeah, I agree. But how much of that is down to the outside factors and the outside circumstances that just don't exist at Liverpool? Outside of it rains quite a lot in the northwest of England. Like his everything else that he might want to go in his favour the people who speak his language, the people who he's been teammates with before, he's played games with before, international teammates. One of the Brazil coaches is right there with Taffarel on the bench. You know, it's all set up for him to succeed. So if he doesn't, he only really has himself to blame. And if you're him, after 2 years of a bit of a nightmare at Juve, the World Cup is basically 2 months away. You don't have to impress for very long. And Liverpool have got all these injuries in midfield, which is why they've gone for him. If he can hit the ground running and have some good games before those guys come back, he's putting himself fully in contention to be part of that Brazil team at the World Cup. And if they go there and they do well and he's a part of that, he could come back in great form and kick on to a whole new level after the World Cup as well. You know, it's not like he's not going to be tired. He's barely been playing for Juve. He's not played a single minute this season. So he's not going to be one of the players who's a long season straight into a World Cup, then the rest of another long season. He's as well rested as any international footballer could ever hope to be right now. So he's got every possible advantage to succeed at Liverpool. It just, the question in the air then has to be, is he the guy who we were promised he was going to be when he left Barcelona, or is the guy who failed at Juve, is that just who he is, you know? And I think we're definitely going to find out, because Liverpool, there's not a very long list of players who've struggled under Klopp at Liverpool who've gone on to be successful elsewhere, is there?
Yeah.
You know, exactly. So I can't say for sure if it's him or us right now, but I would say you would get a definite answer by the time his time at Liverpool comes to an end.
Mate, it's all music to my ears, to be honest, because it leaves it on the player, really. And then if the atmosphere and you give them the building blocks to go and do what they do and they're comfortable, then you're going to get the best out of them. And I think that's the Klopp motto, getting the best out of them. And so with that, I've got your thoughts. This is a really good place for him to be. What about the value then? So there's, we find out that there's a optional buy clause. Mm-hmm. So 37.5 million euros. If, the club obviously don't expect anything. They're not expecting him to go and be amazing, but because of his time at Juve, obviously. But like you said, that might be short-sighted from everybody, because it just wasn't it wasn't a really great atmosphere there. It wasn't a great time to be there in terms of the changes. And it was just your couple of seasons where you needed to rejig things, So that's not good for anyone, even Ronaldo. So if he's
even Ronaldo.
And that makes it interesting for me. It's quite funny that the two guests we've got on, one's been talking about Messi because he's doing a book on Messi, and we're talking Ronaldo on this one. That's crazy. Then we got an Arthur Melo podcast, So, but with him, I'm hopeful. I mean, the value, let's talk value first. Do you think then, if he we've got to say the only way 37.5 million euros is triggered is if Liverpool are happy with him. And that's a snip, right? Surely, if that's what we're getting him at, if he's a success this year.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where, from a Liverpool perspective, if he comes in and does really well, 34 million euros for a starting midfielder is a really good price to pay, isn't it? But from a Juve perspective, after what we said at the very top of the show about paying on paper 75 million for him, his value on Juve's books at the end of next season with amortization and all of that would be around 28 million. So not only are they going to get out from under that massive price, they're actually going to be able to book like a 10 million euro profit on it, which from where he is today is a really good piece of business from Juve. So I think it's one of those where
it suits everyone.
It does. I think if Melo reignites his career and does brilliantly well at Liverpool and gets that move, it's great for him. It's great for Liverpool to have a pre-agreed price on a player that, if he becomes what they want him to become, could be a really useful addition in their midfield, because he is that progressive ball-playing midfielder that you kind of need when teams pack in and you can't go and press and win the ball back and score quickly. You need to be, which is exactly why they signed Thiago as well, right? So you can actually play through teams and not just need to let them onto you so that you can press.
The problem is discipline. Currently the problem is discipline. We need someone who's going to take that left-sided midfield role and sit there with Fab whilst the right-sided midfielder is joining in with attack. That's how they're playing it. So Elliot or even Thiago can take that right-sided midfield role and just go and get involved with Trent and Mo, and because that's where the quality is, and switch that play over to Robbo or Diaz on the left. That's where the play is, and then obviously Nunes in the middle. So Nunes in the middle. So that's what we need. We need someone who's going to be willing to sit there with Fab, hold possession, be good in possession, not lose the ball. And it sounds like he ticks all of those boxes.
Yeah, I mean, I've described him earlier this week as like a caffeine-free diet Thiago, because he's quite a similar player without the
I love it.
Without the kind of forward drive that Thiago has, where he wants to get forward and play it. Melo is much more. I don't want to say it, but in that Andrea Pirlo, just sit there and watch it happen in front of you kind of mold. He doesn't have the range of passing and the vision that Pirlo had. Obviously, nobody does. You're comparing him to an all-time great, but that slower, keep the ball, make the right pass, that kind of player, that old-fashioned Regista style player. And like you said before, he's played in a two-man midfield with Fabinho before. So if that's kind of skewed off to one side, it's not really a big change from a role he's played before with a player he's played that role with before. So that's a win-win, isn't it? And if he can keep that ticking over, it's great. I think Liverpool have benefited massively from the Italian stock exchange rules. So he's gone on loan to Liverpool, and those press releases from Juve have to be sent out because of Juve being on the Italian stock exchange, because they're a publicly traded company. So they have to give out that information. Yeah. And having the opportunity to sell that asset at a profit looks good on Juve's share price. So they always try and get those in. There's the same with Zakaria, who a €3 million loan to Chelsea and a €30 million option on that
13.
deal as well. 30.
So who's the better player? Who would have suited us better, you think?
I would say Zakaria, but I think for whatever reason he seemed to want to go to London and wanted to play for Tuchel. And I think he's played in Germany before. That style probably suits him a little bit better than the way that Liverpool are trying to kind of evolve into playing, aren't they? And I think, and obviously the appeal of London over Liverpool as a city, with all due respect, the way it's viewed on an international scale is completely different.
But we asked for both. We tried for both.
I'm not sure if Liverpool did, but from what I understand, Zakaria wanted to go to London and specifically to Chelsea. That had been talked about for a couple of days. I don't think it wasn't the same as our tour where it just happened yesterday. That had been talked about before the weekend, Zakaria going to Chelsea. So I think that they already had that head start there, and for all intents and purposes, that was done. I'm pretty sure he was in London before we even got the first whiff of our tour to Liverpool.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah,
right, and so really it wasn't even a realistic option for us.
No, it wasn't. He was already going to Chelsea. And I think one last thing on our tour before you want to finish off. Isn't it refreshing to have a transfer that we didn't know anything about until the player was on his way?
Superb.
No rumours, no nonsense. Like, we want that guy on loan. Okay, we'll put him on a plane now. Cool, job done. Let's go.
Normally when that happens, it turned out to be pretty good for us. Fabinho was the last one where it just happened for nowhere.
It's a very, I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it's a very Bayern Munich, Germany style transfer, isn't it? We want that guy. Oh, how much? This much? Okay, cool. Put him on a plane. We'll do it now. Sorted. I love it because it takes out days and days of rumours and nonsense, and he's going to get paid how much, and they're going to pay what, and blah, blah, blah. And,
what was his wage actually at Juve?
I'm not sure, but I can find it very quickly.
Because that'll be interesting, because apparently we're paying a lot of it, but not all of it, was one of the rumours. But I don't know if that's true. I don't know what's true.
They've paid a €4.5 million fee for the loan, haven't they?
Yeah.
So he was on 5 net and 6.5 gross, because of there's a weird euros. Yeah, there's a weird tax law in Italy that means players who come from abroad you get benefit of this growth decree where they pay less of a percentage in tax. So he was only paying 1.55 million euros tax on 6.55 million euros a year wage. So relatively cheap.
Wow, he's only on 108k. Yeah.
Yeah, so
108k. That's really good. They jumped all over that.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to a Premier League club. That's nothing, right?
Absolutely, mate. That is for a quality player. If he turns out to be really good, that sounds like a very, very Liverpool signing. It does. And it just sounds like a very Liverpool signing.
If it works, it's great, isn't it? If it doesn't, it costs you €4.5 million to find out, and Jordan Henderson will be fit by Christmas anyway. So you've covered yourself in the short term for a relatively modest fee on a player with a huge upside.
And to be honest, mate, Jordan's playing left-sided at the moment, or 6, and right's where he wants to play. And as a left-sided midfielder, he's not very good. And he at the moment, he's not very press resistant either. Yeah. We really need someone like a Naby, like a Thiago, like Arthur on that left side to shore it down. Because we look much better. We only got to go for a quad because we had a Thiago or a Naby playing that role all season last year, or a Curtis Jones who can keep the ball very well. So that's the thing. We need someone in there who can actually bloody keep the ball. It's no point in our midfield just goes to shit when it's not disciplined in positioning and can't keep the ball.
Yeah,
because everything just falls apart.
And that's exactly how I would describe Juve's midfield over the 2 years that Arthur was there. It was shit. And yes, he was part of that, but he also never got to play as part of a midfield that functioned either, so we don't know. I mean, Adrien Rabiot, you would say exactly the same about him over the last 2 seasons. But this season, with the midfield actually well organised with an attack that makes sense, he already looks much better. And the other thing is, because of Man United pulling out of, because of the Rabiot deal to Man United collapsing, because Rabiot's mum wouldn't let him go play for Manchester United like he's some 10-year-old boy. It has opened up the opportunity for somebody else to leave Juventus. So that's.
I'm so glad we got him over Rabiot, to be honest. So yeah.
Perfect. I mean, he suits the way that Liverpool play a lot more than Rabiot. If you want someone who can keep the ball, Rabiot is either 9 out of 10 or he's like 4 out of 10. But Artur, I think, with players around him who work in a system that works, I just won't be surprised if he does so well. And I know he's been really bad for Juve, and Juve fans are glad to see the back of him. Absolutely, especially because they paid a stupid fee. Well, they didn't pay, but on paper they paid a stupid fee for him. He came with such high expectations and was so disappointing. But there's so many reasons why that could have happened that we just have to wait and see. And as I said before, supposedly as a Juve expert, I have no idea what he is. So he could turn out to be rubbish. He could turn out to be a player who helps Brazil win the World Cup in 2 months' time. I just don't know, because Juve have been that much of a mess over the last 2 years.
It's going to be fun to find out. It certainly excited me a little bit, because I feel like he's got everything going for him at this club, whereas he didn't have that at yours.
Absolutely.
And I think that fills me with a bit of hope, because I know what it's like. I was an IT, can't compare it to footballers, but you can shift around loads of companies and loads of teams, right? When you move into different teams, and there's teams where you don't feel welcome, but then there's teams where you absolutely feel welcome and you are thriving immediately.
Exactly.
And it's a human thing, isn't it?
Of course it is. And sometimes we're guilty of forgetting that about footballers. They get paid all this money. We see them on TV. We see them at the stadiums. They're untouchable. And you forget, actually, they're just, if you're Adrien Rabiot, you just have to still go home and do what your mummy says, So, like, they're real people at the end of the day, and that stuff matters. And I think the other thing I just want to say just quickly is, I would say, for as bad as Artur has been over his 2 years at Juve, he was better than Bentancur, who now is a very useful Premier League midfielder. And if you get a very useful Premier League midfielder for 37 million euros, which is what, 29 million pounds, that's a good deal. If he's your 4th best midfielder by the end of the season, you would pay that for that insurance 100%. Of having a player who you can just drop in and play.
Well, it's replacing Keita for me. If Keita's going to go on a free now, Naby, at the end of the season, because we didn't get to sell him, I think bringing Arthur in, and if he produces any kind of decent form and does well, it just makes sense for a cheap. It's not an over expensive. We're paying 50, 60 million nowadays for a midfielder for his age. For the way he fits the squad, they'll be happy they got another friend in there. They'll be traveling together when they go to internationals. Do you get what I mean? All of it fits the guy.
It's win-win for everybody if it works out, isn't it?
Exactly, it's 30 million, 35 million pounds. That's a really good deal. So for me, that's actually a cheap way of, that's a cheap way of replacing Naby.
Yeah,
it seems like we might have
a free look at him before you pay it as well. So
exactly. So I think it could work out for everybody here.
Yeah, definitely.
I was dreading this show. I was like, Adam's gonna absolutely nail Arten is gonna really make it look bad. But I've come out of this even more, perked up that I think he's gonna do well.
You just can't. For me, you just can't judge anybody who's been at Juve for the past 2 years because it's been such a shit show that.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, all these players who've left, who've done really well, you can't definitively say he's rubbish. You just can't. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But
I love it.
Genuinely, I've no idea.
It's a great way of describing it and analysing it because the club's been in a different position. And you know what? That's why we get guests like you on the show, because you give us that kind of a different view. So thank you so much, Adam. Really appreciate it. I think that's everything that I need. Is there any final words on Arthur that you want to say, or have we covered everything?
No. I best of luck to him. I wish him well. I think he was a player who never got a chance, and I liked him when I went on the few occasions he did all right. I won't ever say he played particularly well outside of a couple of games, but he looked like he could be a very useful footballer. And if he turns it on and does well for Liverpool, I think that'll be great for him. It's great for Juve because they get out with that massive fee that they paid, and it'll be great for Liverpool and Liverpool fans as well. So it's win-win for everybody, isn't it? So I wish him all the best. It's a really interesting deal, and someone definitely I'll be keeping an eye on this season because I want to know for me if it's actually any good or not.
Yeah, makes sense. It's going to be a good learning experience for everybody. So where can the listeners find you, Adam?
You can find me on, I have a Facebook page and I have obviously Twitter at ADZ77. You can find my work there. I wrote about Arturo and his struggles for Forbes earlier this week. So yeah, I didn't quite manage to jam the caffeine-free diet Thiago reference in there.
No, you should have. That would be great. I should have. Because I read that and I thought, oh God, this is not good.
yeah, but I think from a Juve perspective, it's not. But I think from a Liverpool point of view, it's a whole different ballgame, and you might just find what you're looking for, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts. I think this is always a pleasure.
Thank you.
And eye-opening for me as well, and I'm sure the listeners too. Thank you, Adam. And for the rest of you, this is just a start. We've still got a lot more content coming, and we hope you're enjoying it. And we hope we build the excitement for a new player at Liverpool and a new midfielder that you all desperately wanted. And Naby stayed too, so hopefully he gets integrated into the side. So lots of options, a stronger squad, exactly what we all wanted. Thank you for listening to Media Matters. We'll be back very, very soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.